Let's be real, we've all seen them on TV, right? Those ghost hunters in dark hallways talking to their little gadgets, chasing whispers from beyond. And it looks like a bit of fun, a harmless hobby. But what if that whole persona is actually the perfect cover for something way, way more dangerous? Okay, let's pull back the curtain on the disturbing reality of a completely unregulated industry.
So this is the question we really have to ask ourselves. Is the ghost hunter we see everywhere just a harmless thrill seeker, or are we looking at the perfect camouflage for some truly criminal behavior? The answer, you'll see, is a lot more unsettling than any ghost story you've ever heard.
And this chart right here, it just lays it all out plain and simple. Think about a licensed private investigator. To get that license, they've got to pass background checks, they need to be insured, and they are 100% legally accountable for what they do. If they break the law, they lose their job. Simple as that. Now, look at the paranormal investigator. No license, no insurance, and absolutely zero legal accountability. It's a total free-for-all.
And that gaping hole, that complete lack of rules, has let a quirky little hobby twist into a genuinely dangerous industry, where the real predators, well, they aren't spirits.
The source material for this explainer actually has a name for this: predatory camouflage. It's a term for a really simple and, frankly, terrifying idea. It's when someone uses a socially acceptable role, like ghost hunter, to hide what they're really doing. It lets them get into private homes, into isolated places, and close to emotionally vulnerable people without any of the background checks or scrutiny a real professional would have to go through.
So who exactly is hiding in these shadows? Well, the evidence points to some pretty grim characters. We're talking about sexual predators who use things like spiritual cleansings to groom their victims. We're talking about con artists who exploit people's grief by selling them fake communication with the dead. And we're talking about online vigilantes who build up a following and then unleash them on anyone they decide is a skeptic.
And look, these aren't just what-ifs. These aren't hypotheticals. This constant chase for online clout, for content, for cash, it has led to documented cases of very real, very serious harm. Let's dig into some of the specific examples. Our first case study is just chilling. It's about how the ghost hunter label was used as a weapon for sexual assault.
Get to know this name, David Lynn Turner. He was a former reserve peace officer in Texas. He built up this whole online persona as a paranormal expert, and he specifically went after women who called themselves psychic or sensitive because he figured they'd be more trusting. He used the cover of doing paranormal investigations to lure them to isolated, supposedly haunted places, and there he assaulted them. The court saw right through it. His ghost hunter identity wasn't just a hobby, it was a premeditated tool for his crimes. He's now serving 10 years in prison.
So what happens when you throw TV fame and big money into this unregulated mess? Well, this next case shows the lethal combination of media stardom, domestic violence, and a complete failure of professional oversight.
To millions of people watching TV, Mark and Debbie Constantino were the real deal. They were featured experts on the huge hit show Ghost Adventures. But that bright spotlight was hiding a really dark reality of domestic violence. And the pressure of fame, well, it just threw gasoline on an already volatile relationship until it exploded into this unthinkable tragedy in 2015. Mark murdered Debbie and her roommate, and then he killed himself. And this wasn't just a private tragedy, it exposed a massive failure by the industry. Media companies were making money off these experts without doing a single psychological screening, no background checks, no duty of care, nothing.
This next case really highlights how that line between a thrill-seeking ghost hunter and a home invader can get dangerously blurry, with deadly results.
To a group of teenagers in Ohio, it was just a spooky house. But to the guy who owned it, it was intruders on his property in the middle of the night. You see the problem here? A group of kids trespassed, looking for a ghost. The homeowner, feeling threatened, opened fire. And the result of that friction was a gunshot. For a young woman named Rachel Berzinski, it meant a life changed forever by permanent paralysis. Because in the dark, it turns out a thrill seeker and a home invader can look exactly the same.
And the harm isn't just physical. When Nicola Bulley went missing in the UK, the official police investigation was almost immediately compromised. Not by anything in the case itself, but by a swarm of so-called TikTok sleuths and psychics. They swarmed the area, they trampled potential evidence, they harassed the family, and they forced police to pull critical resources away from the search just to deal with them.
It got so bad police had to issue legal dispersal orders just to get these people to leave so they could do their jobs. That is a direct obstruction of justice, all fueled by a desperate need for online content.
The damage isn't always physical, either. Sometimes it hits you right in the wallet. There's a real legal concept called a stigmatized property, and it has actual teeth. Back in 1991, a landmark court case basically established that if a homeowner publicly advertises their house as being haunted, its value can be legally considered damaged. So when a paranormal team slaps your address on YouTube and declares it haunted for their millions of followers, they aren't just telling ghost stories. They could be actively and legally destroying your property value.
Okay, so after hearing all that, you're probably wondering, what on earth can I do about any of this? Well, it turns out there's a lot. This next section is your practical guide, your legal self-defense toolkit for protecting yourself, your property, and your good name. If you find yourself the target of online harassment, you have to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a prosecutor. First, preservation is key. Screenshot everything: the post, the comments, the harasser's profile. Never delete anything. Use tools like the Wayback Machine to archive the links so they can't just delete it later. Second, you have to establish a pattern, so keep a log. Document every single incident with dates and times. And of course, document any doxing, anytime they share your private info. And finally, document the impact this has had on you, whether it's financial or medical.
Now listen up, because this slide right here, this might be the single most important piece of advice. The words you use matter. A lot. Don't you dare walk into a police station and say, "Someone's being mean to me online." They will tell you to block them and show you the door. You have to use the language of criminal law. You walk in and you say, "I am here to report a criminal course of conduct involving cyberstalking and credible threats of violence." Those words trigger a legal obligation for them to take a report.
And don't just mash that little report button and hope for the best. No. You need to go over their heads directly to the legal departments. This handy guide shows you the specific web forms and email addresses for platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Meta. When you use these, you're creating a paper trail and you're escalating your complaint way beyond the normal, flooded moderation queue.
So, the problems are crystal clear, and those tools for defending yourself are helpful for sure. But to really fix this, we need systemic change. It's time to turn on the lights.
We need a real regulatory framework. I mean, think about it. Mandatory private investigator licensing for anyone offering these kinds of services. That means background checks and insurance. Maybe even classify them like bounty hunters to put restrictions on weapons and mandate de-escalation training. A medical clearance act that would make it a felony to perform an exorcism on someone without getting them checked out by a real psychologist first. And finally, create enhanced felony penalties for trespassing just to do a ghost hunt.
Ultimately, we just have to remember this one core message. The danger here isn't supernatural. It's not about ghosts. It is about criminal human behavior that has found a convenient, profitable, and frankly, socially acceptable disguise. Which really just leaves us with one final question. For decades, we've let this industry operate in the shadows, treating the whole thing as just a bit of fun entertainment. So, what happens when we stop being entertained and we finally start demanding some real accountability? And I think the source material for this explainer just says it perfectly. The ghosts can do what they want, but the ghost hunters, they must answer to us.